All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. I was told to give 5 minutes in CSG time, which, I'd be more than happy to give even more time if you want than that. Ever since I started working for the governor, my name is Brian Selander. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the governor of Delaware. I've been in public service for a bunch of years, took some time off because then State Treasurer Markell said I should go build a business, and I'd be a better public servant for doing that. He was right. But it used to be that when I would show up at events with him, I'd get there about the same time until he got elected and got state troopers. And so I now show up everywhere about 2 minutes late. The troopers look at me and I said, I can't drive as fast as you guys, I'm sorry. I was a toll fellow last year, and Krista said that I may not have much to say, but I'm vaguely funny when I do. So she said, this many days in, just make people laugh for 20 minutes and stand behind the mic because we're going to put this up on the internet. So I said, I can A, be vaguely funny, 2, I can stand behind the mic, and C, I can click people over to the site afterwards. So let's officially start the internet portion of this now and get out the fact that I mentioned I don't speed as fast as my troopers. So I'm here today to talk about message delivery. I'll tell you, I had all of this done until last night, except for this picture. I said, I don't know what to put on there. I don't know what to put on there. And then my friend Jeff Pyatt, who was the managing editor of Yahoo Politics for a while, they get tens of millions of views. He said, every time we put a puppy on Yahoo Politics, we get a huge spike in viewership. So he said, if you're going to do a presentation that winds up on the internet, start with a puppy. And I said, oh, it's even worse because it's about message delivery, right? And it's a post office box, and there's delivering the puppy. He said, don't make that joke, just use the picture. So I told you a little bit about me. I always like to know a little bit more about the people I'm talking to so I don't wind up in left field. I call it the Roger Daltrey question. For those of you who don't know The Who, he's the lead singer of The Who. This is not a picture of Roger Daltrey because I didn't want to pay the $17 to actually get rights to a photo. So anybody want to tell me, do we have any elected officials in the room? Great. And do we have any vendors in the room also, folks in the private sector? And do we have any? Well, I always assume that everything we say is going to wind up somewhere anyway. The iPhone generation is it's a whole different world that you've inherited. So, all right, the question about who are you is one you have to get down to 15 seconds, as you all know, as elected officials. It's a lesson I learned when I was 15 years old. I fibbed about my age when I was 15 to get a job as a reporter at my local Gannett paper. My first job ever was cleaning toilets in a pharmacy. And I didn't want to do that for a living. So I wrote a letter to my paper saying, hi, I'm ending my scholastic journalism career, and I'd love to write for a living. Can you give me a shot? And there was this wonderful editor, Carol Hunter, who did. But journalism's a tough place, and some of the editors were pretty tough too. And I remember being 15 years old, so my mom drives me to the newspaper, drops me off behind the building. So I walk around the front, so that way nobody knows that I don't have a car and couldn't actually drive to cover anything. And I'm sitting there, dutiful young journalist in my new press suit, trying to look, 20 years older, and waiting for people to call me back. And this editor comes up to me. She'd never seen me. She hadn't gotten the memo that I guess you're supposed to be nice, right? And she says to my terrified 15-year-old self, what are you doing here, and why are you wasting my time? I didn't have it. I was like, and I just kind of clammed up, and I didn't know what to say, and I just went home, and you always have that moment a couple hours later when you know exactly the right thing to say, but it's always 2 hours late. I had that moment. 3 years later, I got sort of pulled into politics, and I was volunteering as a speechwriter for our Senator Frank Lautenberg. And I went in to write this speech for him and gave it to somebody, the press secretary, and she took it into this room that everybody's really hush-hush about. And she comes back out, and she said, David says that you ended a sentence with a preposition. We do not end sentences with prepositions. I thought, there goes, there's 2 careers in a row I've blown, right? So I changed the preposition, and I think, well, who's David? She said, well, David's in charge. I said, well, I want to meet the guy in charge, right? So I bring the speech into David. I open the door, and David's office is just a mess. There's just stuff everywhere. He's literally pulling his own hair out, right? He looks up at me, stuff everywhere. He goes, who are you, and why should I care? And having been berated when I was 15, I said, I'm Brian Selander, and I wrote the speech that you loved outside of the preposition. And he said, do you want a job? You're really good at this. So I learned, to be able to tell your story in 15 seconds or less. Somebody mentioned the iPhone and how everything we do winds up on video. God bless you for being in politics and public service this time. It used to be really simple. You would explain who you were. You'd have a press conference or a speech, then the media would cover it, and then it would get out to the public. It was pretty linear. It was pretty easy. I know what I'm going to say. I have time to be thoughtful about it. I have time to think through my speech. I have time to do the research and get the counter-arguments, and it will flow out to everyone. And wasn't that a fun period? That was a much more fun period than now, where, oh my God, there's 7,000 things going on simultaneously. I'm right in the middle of it. I'm one small dot in the middle of this whole mess. I have no idea where things are coming from. There's people who are tweeting and blog posting and linking and calling and blogging about me and taking videos of it. And somehow from all of this mess and all of this dialogue emerges my message and my cohesive narrative that I have much less control over than I ever did before in that sort of more linear approach. So this is the world that we've evolved into for those of us in public service. I mean, I remember my grandmother had a TV that actually looked like that, and she would tell stories about how in the late 40s people would gather around, or early 50s, and they'd all watch the same news, right? We all had the same dialogue. These were the facts. This is what we were going to debate about. There was an accepted set that this was an actual fact, and this was not. And we as a nation had a more general dialogue. Well, now, there are grandmas and grandpas and kids that are finding news on their own. And you can say that's a great thing, and it is, because you can dig deeply into individual issues. But there's a psychological phenomenon called confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is that we will go out and seek information that agrees with us, and it will reinforce our position. And we will disagree or dismiss information that doesn't fit our worldview, even if it's a fact. Right? There was a study at Yale, I think, where they had people who were pro-capital punishment and anti-capital punishment. And they showed them 10 compelling facts for and 10 compelling facts against. And you would think, rational behavior, right? If I present it with 10 lock-solid compelling facts against my position, I should probably be less certain about my position after I'm done. But almost every single person, when confronted with those facts, just dismissed what they didn't agree with and gave more credibility to what they already thought was real. And so that is the world that we're operating into now. People don't like you. They don't like your position. They'll figure out a way, even if it's right, to go around it and find something that reinforces their opinion. So you have to get past positions, and you have to get past sound bites, and you have to convince people that even if they don't like your position, you share their values. Right? Every dialogue that you have, every policy you make has to be founded in values now. Because if I don't agree with your take on farm subsidies, or I don't agree with your take on internet taxation, or I don't agree with your take on something, I need to at least know that you, my elected official, share my values. And that values language, as a sort of a sales tactic, goes all the way back to our Constitution. Look at the values in this, right? In order to form a more perfect union, that's the value of community. Establish justice. Justice is a value. Domestic tranquility, right? A value. Common defense, that's a value of strength. General welfare, that's compassion, right? General welfare is really the value of compassion. Secure the blessings of liberty is liberty itself a value. And ourselves and our posterity, that's a value of future generations. There's like 19 different core values inherent in here. And you as elected officials need to figure out which are the 4 or 5 that really drive you every day. And then integrate that into everything you're talking about. You find your values. Once your values are set, then you build your policies as a way of expressing those values, and then you build your talking points based on those. So in Delaware, what we talk about a lot is opportunity, right? We can't guarantee everybody's going to have success, but we can guarantee that everybody deserves a chance to be successful. Opportunity, accountability, opportunity, accountability, opportunity, accountability. And when we talk about that, that's in the middle of every single policy proposal that we make. So once you've figured out your values, your policies, and your points, there are sort of 5 C's to developing your message. Now, the first is clear. Now, what's clear to us is not clear to our constituents all the time because we're in the middle of these discussions, right? I've had so many people say, wow, that person gave a great speech, but I had no idea what 8 of those acronyms meant, and I was too embarrassed to actually stand up and say, what is a BAFO? So clear. Second is concise. I worked for a guy named Tom Carper, who was a senator from Delaware, and Tom really wanted to give people the answer he thought they deserved. So when asked by a reporter a question about something like postal reform, he would go on for 15 minutes. And they would love him. The reporters would say, what a smart guy, what a thoughtful guy. But they wouldn't be able to use anything he said because he talked in sentences that were this long, And I was talking with the staff the other day, and he's still in office, about postal reform. And I said, it sounds like you're wasting billions of dollars a year and the Congress isn't doing anything. It sounds like you need first-class delivery of solutions, but the Congress has taken bulk rate time to get there. He's like, Brian, I think people might actually quote that. I said, thank you, sir. So concise. The third is to connect with people. When we're elected, people who are elected officials, you have to go out and sell yourself, right? It's like, hey, you need to vote for me. You need to vote for me. You need to vote for me. When you're up for re-election, it's look what I did, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did. Totally natural, right? It's like you're interviewing for a job every 2 or 4 years. So it's look at me, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did. But people don't care about us, right? They care about themselves, and they want to know how we are connecting to them. And it takes that mental gymnastics to use sort of you first language instead of me first language. So what did you do this session? We gave teachers a better opportunity to teach their classes. Moms and dads are more safe on their streets because X, right? Kids have more chances because Y. And it's changing the language from me first to you, the constituent first. So after you've been clear, so they know what you're talking about, concise so they can listen for that long, connecting so it feels like you're talking to them, it needs to be compelling. You need to get them to act. It needs to have a reason to actually do something beyond just say, well, that's nice, I'll remember that. And the fifth is to contrast. Now, this is easier in elections than it is in governing, right, because you have an opponent. But in the private sector or public sector, there is always another option. And the other option is to do nothing. Right? People don't genuinely like change. I mean, they like to say they vote for change and things, but when you actually get to changing things, anything that's not the status quo has a much higher bar to happen. So you have to explain through your message the downside of inaction as well. So clear, concise, connecting, compelling, contrasting. For those of you in the private sector that are here as well, I'll show you this isn't just public sector work. This works in the private sector. That is the invisible hand of the free market. As you can tell, it's invisible. And that was my attempt at a joke. So in 2003, I'd worked for guys like Bill Bradley. I'd worked in the New Jersey legislature. I'd worked for Senator Carper. And my friend Jack Markell, who was then the state treasurer of Delaware, said, you know what, Brian, you should go out and build a business. He said, you got an entrepreneurial spirit. You should go out and join a small company and really grow it. And so I joined this wonderful small company called Silver Oak. And I said, hey, what are we about? What do we do? We're a management consulting company that does strategic sourcing. I said, well, great. What is that? Because if I'm going to be managing director of this company, I should know what we're actually doing, right? And they said, well, we convince people to move from ITBs to RFPs. We implement multi-round BAFOs. We do this thing called LPP, which is leverage purchasing power. And we write these macros to do granular level data analysis into your spreadsheets. I'm like, oh, okay, I actually know what all that means. But I don't know how to explain it, right? I said, how about this? At the end of the day, when we're done working for somebody, it sounds like we're going to slash costs, not services, and raise value, not taxes, right? That we're going to use the business best practices from your state's businesses with the common sense values of our state's families who buy a 6-pack of soda, not one can at a time, right? That buy a bulk pack back then of VHS tapes. They don't buy one at a time. And in the process of using those business best practices and those common sense values, we're going to save you hundreds of millions of dollars. They're like, yeah, that is what we do here. That is right. And they felt better about it. Legislators felt better about it. But the moment that really broke us open as a company was Mark Warner was a client, governor of Virginia. And we'd saved Virginia taxpayers $100 million. We were a management consulting firm. We'd come in and look at what they bought and get better prices. And sitting there talking to Warner, he's like, so what is this all about? I said, this is really about light bulbs. He said, what do you mean about light bulbs? I said, well, this light bulb, it used to cost, say, like 97 cents. Now this light bulb is 85 cents. He's like, I got it. So the next big speech Mark Warner gives, he's talking about this big budget problem that Virginia has. And he pulls a light bulb out. And he says, you know what? We are in some tough financial times here in Virginia. But we look down to the light bulb level for savings. He said, this light bulb used to cost 97 cents. Now it's 80-something cents. He said, that may not sound like much, but it adds up to over $100 million in savings. And I'll tell you, we may have to raise taxes. But if we do, people in Virginia are going to know that we look down to the very light bulbs before asking them for a nickel in more money. And it really worked. So this is the guy I work for. His name's Jack Markell. You probably don't know him because in Delaware we may have the most chickens per capita and the most patents per capita. We've got the most PhDs per capita, but we have a very small capita. We are proud to be the nation's 49th largest state. We have more tolls per capita, so thank you for those of you who live on the East Coast. And most of your companies are incorporated in Delaware, so thank you for that as well. Jack Markell is the vice chair of the National Governors Association. He was chairman of the Democratic Governors Association 2 years ago. He's the co-chair with Governor Perdue of Georgia of the National Common Core Standards Initiative. He's a toll fellow himself back when he was treasurer. Private sector success, he left McKinsey to join a company called Fleet Call. And he said, again, messaging, hey, what do we sell here at Fleet Call? And they said, well, we want to create the next generation of telephones. He said, oh, we should call the company Nextel. And yeah, that worked out pretty well for him, right? So then he went on to Comcast. So we inherited the largest budget shortfall in state history. Jack got sworn in January 2009, months after everything was falling apart. He's an amazing guy, very smart, very collaborative. We bring people together, and he's done a lot of great things. And if I, as his spokesperson, can have the liberty to say, hey, my governor does great things. So this is shocking news for you that I think I work for a good guy. But we've got, with the help of people like Helene Keeley, so much done. Pension reform was a big conversation yesterday. We got pension reform done without a single protest, without a single layoff. We actually brought the unions in. We said we don't care to argue about where we need to go because we have to hit this dollar amount. If you can help us get there and you can come up with a plan to get us there, we'll go there with you. And so all over the country, you see these massive fights, these big debates, these terrible, terrible things said about your state employees. I mean, my take is if I tell my daughters they have to respect their teacher, and then they see me not respecting their teachers, what language or lesson does that send to them, right? So it's been Jack's approach too. We've kept our AAA bond rating. Helene Keeley is the chair of our bond bill committee. Well done, Helene. So AAA bond rating, we've won both race to the tops. We have stronger safety laws, environmental improvements. We've expanded civil rights. We've done fun things that you don't hear about in the paper, like kids that age out of foster care. So if you're 18 years old, 17 years old, you're in foster care, you're 18 years old, all of a sudden, most places, you're just kicked out on the street with nowhere to go or nothing to do. Chance that you're going to wind up committing crimes, very high. Chance you're going to wind up homeless, much higher than otherwise. So we've been able to do these really great programs, but we don't talk about any of them because the only thing that we talk about really is jobs, jobs, jobs. And this is the take home for you. Everything we talk about is connected directly to how do we get people back to work. Everywhere we go, Jack's message is, I want to make Delaware the best place in the country to raise a family or start a business. And every single issue we talk about, we bring right around back to jobs. So we've done great things. We talked about internet taxation. Amazon had plenty of places to choose. They just decided to put 850 new jobs in Delaware last month. And they're expanding that. They told us yesterday they're going to grow that up to 1,200. Right? So we tell stories like that. We tell stories about the only refinery in the country to reopen the last couple of years was in Delaware because jobs, jobs, jobs. But every single other issue we talk about connects right back to jobs. And my recommendation is when you go back to your states that every single issue you talk about connects back as well. So schools. Everybody wants stronger schools. But why are schools important when it comes to jobs? Because employers want to locate in places with great public schools. Right? Investing in our schools is investing in jobs because employers want to choose a place where they can put their kids in those public schools. And down the road, those schools that are strong produce the kind of employees that can win that international fight for jobs. So every time we talk about schools, it's about jobs. When we talk about fiscal responsibility in our AAA bond rating, that's about jobs too, because every employer that's looking for a place to choose, a place to locate, wants to know that every dollar in their company is being well spent. And so it's up to us to say every single tax dollar that you may give us is going to be well spent as well. So even fiscal responsibility is about jobs. Public safety. Public safety used to just be able to stand alone. I recommend that it connects fully with jobs because people want to locate businesses and expand businesses in places that are safe. They don't want to worry that their kids aren't safe on their way to school. They don't want to worry that their employees aren't safe on their way to work. Public safety, also about jobs. And environment, depending on which way you look at it, environment can also very much be about jobs. It's an issue that Democrats sort of get hung up on sometimes because their debate on talk radio is environmental laws just kill jobs. But the counter to that is people want to build jobs and raise families in places with clean air, clean water, and a livable environment. Right? So now we've just taken four issues that are usually separate and made them completely in line with our economic message on jobs. There are so many ways to do this now: press conferences, events, calls, constituent mail, Facebook, Twitter, websites, Wikipedia, your homepage, your YouTube, your LinkedIn, which is something elected officials don't use enough of. It's a great way to join debates with business leaders. Your business leaders are on LinkedIn. You should be too. They're having debates. You should weigh in with your state rep account, state senate account, because that way you're connecting directly with them. In articles, part of the reason for being so aggressive up front is at some point somebody's going to hit you with something that takes you off track. Right? There's somebody in this room I really, really like a lot. And I emailed this person and said, hey, does anybody have any advice? And this person said, you should Google me. Because I made this one speech, it was a minute long, and it got international attention out of context, and now the first 800 responses are all about me comparing women to livestock, which I did not do. but it is the next 800 results about me. It's like, how do I fix that? I'm like, there is no easy way to fix international attention on that except to just build back, keep linking to things, keep linking to things. When you go on your interviews, back up a little bit. So the company that I was running, we sold it. I was able to spend some time just trying to figure out what to do next. There was a contest in Delaware to see who would be the new afternoon talk radio host. I'd like to win things. I was totally unqualified for this job, but I thought, hey, how cool would it be if I got to be the talk radio host while my friend was running for governor, right? So I entered this contest and won and got a chance to be our afternoon statewide talk radio host for a full year, where I got to be on the other side of the mic and get a chance to watch people do this very badly and do this very well. And so the people that are bad at interviews are the ones that don't realize the questions that you get asked don't necessarily have to be the questions you choose to answer. All right, and so, hey, so tell me about that massive layoff at X company yesterday. You know, we are working hard to make sure that those people have access to great jobs, and we're trying to make sure that all of those companies that are hiring, Comcast, Citibank, all these other places, can get them right to work, right? It's acknowledgement and then pivot, acknowledge and then pivot, acknowledge and pivot. You don't have to necessarily say, I'm going to answer the loaded question that you're being given. You have freedom once they're done asking to answer the question you wish they'd asked instead, right? If they're totally off topic, right? If they want to talk about a general services debacle of a trip, big mess of a mass of things in Las Vegas, and they want to know what protections are in place in Delaware to make sure that that doesn't happen here, we do have those protections, right? And we do make sure that those things don't happen, that our teams aren't flying out to Las Vegas. But I don't really talk about that, right? That's off message. If my boss only has 5 minutes to be on the radio, I don't want him talking about protections for GSA. I want him talking about jobs, right? And so you stick. We have protections in place. One of the things D.C. could have done was come up to Delaware. We have an amazing tourism industry that puts 15,000 people to work, taking care of people just like you. It's like, God, you guys never stop talking about jobs, do you? No, we never do. And every time you ask us another question, we're going to do our best to bring it back to jobs. Value statements. If you have a chance to answer something, make sure you talk about the common sense values that your constituents have, right? This is really about hard work. It's really about opportunity. This is really about giving everybody a chance to succeed. So those words have to be in there. And then stories. Like, everybody's got that great grandma or grandpa in the district. I had a woman when I worked in the New Jersey legislature. Her name was Mary Alice Bellardo. And every morning at 8:05 a.m., Mary Alice Bellardo, a retired grandma from South Plainfield, New Jersey, would call up our office. And she would give us our working orders for the day. She'd say, "Is this Bob Smith's office, Assemblyman Smith's office?" I'm like, it's every day it is. Yeah. It's the same. And she'd say, "Brian, I need you to fight for this. I need you to fight. And every day for 20 minutes, we'd put her on speaker and we'd do some other work. We'd still listen. She would tell us exactly what we needed to do for the day. And I'll tell you, every time, I believe she's since passed away, but every time I get discouraged or disheartened or think maybe I should go back to the private sector, I think that there are grandmas like Mary Alice Bellardo in towns all over America that are so passionate about making sure their grandkids get a chance that those are the people I think of to get back to work the next day, right? And it's those Mary Alice Bellardos that we all have in our districts that should drive us to go that little bit further. Story. Google alerts, so like we all read the paper, right? We're not as many people read the paper anymore. I'm sure we all go down. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so I actually carry both of them down to the driveway every morning, and then I bend over and one of them picks up the paper, and then we read the paper together, or they look at the paper, they ask who's that. But beyond that, there's a whole world out there of people saying probably terrible, hopefully good things about you. If you don't have a Google alert, you need to set one up right now on your cell phone. So you go to news.google.com. Yahoo has these things too, but you type in your own name in quotes. Now make sure you put it in quotes because otherwise it'll show up, with everything else. And then you want Google to let you know anytime anybody says anything about you, they will email it to you right away. So there's an article about you, a blog post about you, a tweet about you. If you don't have a Google alert, your opponents, your competitors, your other private sector businesses know what was said about you before you do. Now, there are really expensive services you can buy for this, monitoring services. There's less expensive services. Meltwater is one of them that'll do these tracking. But this is the easiest way to catch 90% of what's said about you. Same thing with Twitter. If you have a Twitter account, Twitter's got a built-in tracking feature for you, so you know anybody that's tweeting about you. Because the the critical time for getting your message right is within like 20 minutes, really, of when something's first said about you. Because if you don't have control of it the first 20 minutes and you don't have your own people ready to mobilize to dismiss it, then it lives forever on the internet. You know, people say, why do I spend as much time as I do talking with some of our bloggers? It's because if I'm going to Google Jack Markell and jobs, and there's a blog post out there that totally distorts our record, right? Somebody may find that. Some independent person who's trying to decide where to build their business may find that out about us first. And so I want to know as soon as it goes up so I can correct it. So Google alerts, Twitter feeds like that. And then, as we all know, every now and then there's things you just can't control, right? Somebody comes up to you and says, hey, it turns out that despite having a water ban statewide because of droughts, your general services department decided before a big press conference to power wash the steps so they look pretty. You're like, really? Yeah. They're so excited though. They really want to do a good job. You know, it's like, oh man. You know, or it gets worse. That whole like, hey, how come your legislative colleague is married to 4 different women? You know, those sort of things happen occasionally. And then you're faced with a couple questions on what to do. And there's really 5 different approaches. The first is to just deny it, right? Not true. Never happened. Impossible. 5 wives. It's crazy. The second is to attack the questioner. Well, you don't have any credibility. There was a big city mayor that got busted for speeding, and he was going like 80 miles an hour and like a 25, right? And this reporter decided to try and trail the mayor. So the reporter's going, 80 miles, also breaking the law. And so this reporter decides to, in today's parlance, punk the mayor by saying, hey, you are a law and order mayor, right? And yet I saw you really, really, really breaking the law. And this big city mayor looked at the person and said, I don't believe you're a credible person. And so I'm not going to answer your question. And that's a terrible way to try and do this, but it is one approach. The third is to simply resign, always an option. The fourth is to do your best to simply try and reframe it. I know you're talking about this, but really we should be about this. Almost always, something hits you and something's bad. Just say, you know what? That's probably right. Thank you for finding that. We're going to go out of our way to fix it. How should we best do that, right? And it's totally disarms reporters. When your answer is, wow, you're right, that's terrible, what else should we do to fix it? They're like, all the steam goes right out of them because they're ready for this multi-day series. They're ready for this multiple-day expose. They're ready to find out more. And your point is, wow, yeah, man, that is bad. And so let's find 70,000 other things that might be in that realm that we can work on together, and then ask them for their answer, which they don't always have. It's wonderfully disarming. And it's also helpful in terms of building a better government, right? I like to say that the best-run company in the world has, like at most 97% inventory control. I mean, that's really stretching it, right? The Walmart person was here, but to think that Walmart loses a certain percentage of its inventory every day, and that's one of the better-run companies in the world. So how are we in government? If the best-run company in the world is 97% efficient, and we've got a $3 billion budget, even if we match them, that would be millions and millions of dollars that we could use help finding and tracking, right? And so you say things like that, gosh, we would love to be the best-run company in the world. We won't be. So when we do make mistakes, we're really grateful you find them, and it takes all the steam out of it. And then when you go out with your solutions, you have to get out everywhere at once. So it used to be we just put out a press release and say, here's our press release about the problems. You have to hit all of your channels instantly if you can, because the number of people that read the newspaper or watch TV, it's all so fragmented, right? The grandma and grandpa that are at their laptop now. So it's a press release about it, put it up on your Facebook page, make sure all of your supporters link to it, put it up on Twitter, make sure they refollow, and then if you can, do a video about it. So the power of Facebook isn't in your followers. We've got 6,000, which is not a bad number for a state our size. But every time somebody clicks like on that or decides to share it, the average person under 21, I think, has like 800 friends. The average person under 40, I think, has got another 600 friends. So that means if I put something out there on Facebook and somebody clicks like, it shows up on their profile and their 600 friends see that, right? So our 6,000, if everybody, and they don't, but if like all 6,000 of those people then decided to share it, that's 6,000 times 600 views in our state. And that's why those of you that ignore social media do so at your peril. So that's that's kind of the ABCs about how to do your message: clear, concise, compelling, contrasting, connecting. Make sure to bridge back to questions. Use values when you can to infuse what you're talking about. Everything is about jobs, 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 jobs. Schools are about jobs. The environment's about jobs. Fiscal responsibility is about jobs. You will do much better in the next couple of months if you happen to be somebody up, if you talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. Admit it, move on, ask for advice when scandal hits, and make sure you flood all the channels. So that's the sort of my part of it. I'd love to just talk to you about your own challenges, or since it's a nice day out, we can take this outside if you'd like. Before I go, though, I just want to thank you. So these are my kids. And my wife's a psychologist, so she doesn't like to be in pictures or anything. But that's Nara Grace, she's 4, and that's Sage, she's 2. And you have really hard jobs, and you put yourself out there in a way that other people don't have to, right? And you hear what people say about elected officials and about those of us in public service, and they seem to think that there are these massive benefits, you know? They're like, oh, they're just doing this because they get a chance to and they, there's the fat cats, and they get a chance to, make a lot less money than they would if they had full-time jobs somewhere else, And they get the problem of having people come up and yell at them in restaurants, and I mean, it's really a sacrifice. I mean, public service is a service, and the sad news is, I guess, people just don't always stop to think about it, right? I mean, some people are 7 times more likely to tell you something if they're mad at you than they are if they're happy about it. I mean, I remember when I was on the radio show, I just thought I was the worst thing to ever hit the airwaves because 90% of the emails were like, "You suck, Selander, you're terrible at this job," I came home after my first 2 days, I'm like, "I'm really bad at this, hon, I don't know," I get it, everybody's just like, just hateful, terrible things about me, attacking my parents they've never even met. They're like, your parents should be embarrassed that you're even alive, and I'm like, gee, I must be terrible at this, right? But our ratings actually were pretty good, and people actually seem to be okay with it. It's just that people tend to default to being really mean to you if you're in the public eye. So just know, I mean, one of the great parts about CSG, and one of the reasons I was so excited to be a Toll Fellow and while I'm coming back, is at least a couple days a year we get a chance to see each other in an environment that isn't full of debate, right? We get a chance to recognize that there's really great people that have decided to put themselves into public service. And to the extent that I can be helpful over the next couple of years as you build your own careers, just giving some advice or helping sharpen something for you. I'm just so grateful that you've all decided to do this. And I mean, I'll be back in the private sector doing something at some point in the next couple of years, but I just feel so blessed to have the chance to make things a little better for my kids. I mean, we're doing some education reform pieces in Delaware right now, and my wife points out, like, the schools that you're working on really hard right now are the same schools our kids are going to be in, so keep that in mind, right? So anyway, that's just my thank you. And, whether you're thinking about Mary Alice Bellardo or you're thinking about Nara or Sage Selander, we all do this for them. So thank you. And that's messaging. Anybody have a particular problem that they'd like help with? Or we can just break up into small groups, or I'll just hang around. So CSG folks, should I stand behind the podium for the next 40 minutes, or should we just... Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And I have not been able to do that. And I actually had an opportunity to interview a student that I gave an award to. And I had her to do the interview, but then I couldn't post it. So I really have had a problem with how to use YouTube. And then just managing all those different accounts.
Yeah.
Facebook, Twitter, and you say LinkedIn. I hadn't even gotten into LinkedIn because I feel like I can't keep up. So any advice that you can give in that area, I would really appreciate.
So one of the things I also run in the governor's office, he calls me the chief strategy officer, so it's communications and what the overall agenda is going to be and our constituent relations and our scheduling. So it's like director of non-math, right? He doesn't trust me to add or subtract anything, really. But constituent relations, there's so many ways to get to people now that there's so many easy ways to lose something. And you're like, I called you and you never, I tried to reach out to you, I got this pressing. We're like, how did you reach out to us? I sent you a direct message on Twitter. Like, yeah, that's one of the 9 ways to get in touch with us. And how thorough were you in 140 characters about your problem? Must have been pretty deep. So yeah, there are so many ways to have that go wrong. So we have part of my staff, and some of you aren't lucky enough to have a big staff, but part of their job is to just go through, cut and paste things, and send it to the same account. So whether it's the Facebook account or the Twitter feeds or his LinkedIn thing, which you would assign an email address to, somebody's job is just to check everything all the time and then put it into one funnel so that if we need to, somebody senior can look at it. Because it is easy. And Facebook is a great way to have these massive flare-ups and these big fires, and you really can't have your 20-year-old intern being the one to try and determine whether something needs to get senior attention or not, because they just don't know, that this issue really means X, right? Even though they say this issue is about Y, it really means this issue is about X, and it takes somebody to do it. So have somebody that just aggregates all that and puts it up. When it comes to YouTube, it's actually pretty easy. If you have an iPhone now, you can just have a staffer go ahead, videotape it, and just with a couple clicks, you can put it right on your YouTube channel. It is that simple. Now, there's some elected officials that have the full. You could buy a good digital camera for $800, which your campaign account can pay for, or because we don't want to spend taxpayer dollars recklessly. But so for $800, you can get an HD camera now. It's actually true that your iPhone, today's iPhone. I have a friend that's launching a cable sports network for kids, like Nickelodeon meets ESPN. And one of the guys that was big in the NFL said that his kid's iPhone takes better quality video than a $15,000 arm-held camera did in 1990 now. Right? That's the sort of power in our pocket. And I can try and show you afterwards. You can video it. 30 seconds, YouTube clips should be less than 3 minutes or people won't watch them. If you're going to do full speeches, it's actually better to break them up into chunks. So if you have a state of the state or a kickoff speech or a policy piece, you can tape the whole thing, but then break it up into 2-minute or less, 90-second, 60-second pieces, so that way, if you want to just see that portion of it, you can hit to it. Keywords are critical, so make sure that your keywords are you. To my good friend with the terrible Google result, one of the ways to kind of build that back is to make sure that there's lots of videos that have him tagged saying other things than the speech they took out of context. So that's, but yeah, your iPhone is better than what the NFL used to do games in the early 90s. Sir?
My question is would you help is it on? Would you help prioritize, you got a lonely senator in Idaho Falls, Idaho, a real remote location.
Anybody in particular you're thinking about?
No staff.
I'm guessing it's you.
No staff. Prioritize. How did they do it? How did they do it all? What's most important, and how can you get by?
Yeah. So one, obviously, the priority is your district and only your district. And so a lot of senators should do this. I don't know if they all do. Yeah, put a bounce back message on all your accounts. So your email accounts, anything that comes in, and the bounce back message should be, thank you so much for taking the time to write me. I really appreciate that you did. My priority is to the people of the 8th District, so I will make sure to get back to you first if you happen to be a resident. If not, it may take me a little bit more time, right? And that way, immediately after writing you, they get something back from you, even though it's an auto response. So they feel like you're definitely hitting them. And it also gives you the ability to tell people, I am from this district, so I will get back to you quickly. In terms of prioritizing, the good news is so many of these pieces, it's the same content, just cut up in different ways. So if you give a speech is really, a press release is really a speech with 2 other paragraphs written in it, right? And a Twitter is a breakdown of a bunch of that speeches into smaller sections, and your Facebook post is your press release plus some pictures. I have a webinar actually that I did for CSG about social media and how social media like Facebook is really about letting your constituents talk about the great things they're doing rather than you telling them the great things that you're doing. So, should cultivate that too. But bounce back message, make sure that your constituents get it first, and then really once you've written it, it's actually fairly easy to break that up into different chunks for that. Sir.
Just a quick observation. The BlackBerry, or our new technology that we hold in our pocket, this one's for BlackBerry people. It's Waterloo, Ontario that invented it, so we're not doing so well. There's more technology in this little machine than there was to put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
If anyone didn't know that, it took. We now have more technology in here. We could go to the moon with this, I guess.
I think my wife would like to send me to the moon when each time I spend on my iPhone, or at least send the phone to the moon.
So could you go over for me the traps and the pitfalls of each of these? Because there's a lot of people who have ruled out YouTube, or they've ruled out certain things because of the bad stories they've heard.
Yeah.
or because of the inability. So if you could go through the pitfalls and the traps, and
Sure.
then how to avoid them.
Well, I can also sort of boil it up into to try and be concise and compelling on it. If you're not telling your story through those channels, somebody is telling a story about you through those channels, right? So if you're not on Facebook explaining the great things that you and your constituents are doing together, somebody is on Facebook saying what they think about you, right? If you're not on Twitter explaining the great things that you're doing, somebody else is out there saying things about you, right? So it really just boils down to you have to, because if you don't take the time to make your own case, nobody's going to make it for you. When it comes to blogs and things, I recommend that if you don't have time to actually keep your blog up to date, it looks sad. We took ours down for 6 months because we just didn't have the agencies, making a priority out of putting blogs back up, and then we told them we're serious about it, so then we put it back up. So, I mean, don't start something like a blog that you can't keep updated, but everybody else is using this technology right now in your district to explain what they think about you. You have to use it to explain what you think about them. And by the way, the answer is you really like them. Right? Sir.
Brian, my question is, how much time should we spend? And you kind of answered it with the blog. So don't start something that you're not going to upkeep and maintain and keep current. The same thing with Facebook. So how much time should we spend on this? Is it a daily activity, twice a day, once a week? Because that's where I get into trouble with my own Facebook page. I can't keep up with posting.
Yeah. Well, I think at least you should be able to have something that goes on at least once a day on your Facebook page. Now remember, Facebook is as much about your own personal brand as it is about. You should look. If you think about Facebook as like, I'm going to put out a press release every day, or I feel like I need to introduce a bill every day about Facebook, then you're going to drown. You're just want to kill yourself, because there's no way you're going to be able to do that. I don't care how great you are in the legislature, you're not putting out 365 awesome bills a year. And if you are, it means you're not paying attention on getting any of them passed, right? Because you're too busy writing them to actually drive them. But you know what? Your constituents would love to know that you went down to Jim's coffee shop, right? We get more responses. So the other day, like on Mother's Day, we had Kelly, who works for me, helps to run the governor's Twitter page. And so she asked a question on the governor's Facebook page. What are you doing to honor your mom today? And we got scores of people who wanted to talk about how much they love their mom and great things that they're doing. When we got like NASCAR's coming up in Delaware, right? And so on Twitter, it was, what great places should visitors to NASCAR stop and see in Delaware? Easy, right? It took 30 seconds. And you know what? Everybody wants to talk about what a great thing they've got going in their own backyard. And so now they're responding back to you. All of their friends see it. You're not telling them anything. You're listening to them. And so these kind of broad things. I've got a bunch. I don't even know several hundred of the people that are my friends on Facebook, right? But at this point, I'm public enough that I don't really have a choice, because if I don't, anyway. But I even kind of curate and cultivate, my own stuff. And so it's, I made a joke about this. PowerPoint on Tuesday, because we all have crazy lives, and so I got around to starting to do this on Tuesday. And I wrote, doing this PowerPoint that feels like a take-home midterm from college. And Krista Reinhardt from CSG wrote back, hopefully you're not talking about the PowerPoint that you're supposed to hand in last week, Brian. Which led to all of these small business people, Rodney Jordan, who's the CEO of Armor Graphics. So Rodney then weighs in with, we do this too. And it became this whole dialogue that was totally independent of me on my Facebook page about the fact that I procrastinated. I think it turned out okay, by the way, that I waited until Tuesday night to actually start this. So yeah, if you think about it, ask questions and let other people have a conversation.
Okay, so you ask a question.
Yep.
And you get all these people tell you about places to go and
Yep.
are you supposed to respond to them?
Yeah, you can. You can weigh in and say, if you've been, no, you don't have to. But so if you've been there, right? So somebody recommends, what I always do for my mom, if somebody says, I found that I've been getting my mom the same flower every day every Mother's Day for the last 30 years, right? All you have to write back is say, wow, that's a really great idea. Right? Or thank you for those good ideas. And it's 5 seconds of your time. What's that?
You get 200 responses.
Yeah.
And you respond back. How can you?
No, you don't have to respond to all 200, but you should 5 hours later make sure that you say, thank you so much for taking the time. These are some really great ideas. And you've just communicated, think about that though, you've just communicated directly to 200 people to say, I have taken the time to read what you have to say and appreciate it. And that's going to matter a lot to people.
Brian, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
My question is, with all of this out there, and let's say you do a radio interview, and then the comments start coming in, and typically, of course, they're code names and they're anonymous, and they're just sometimes people that are really ornery, and they're obnoxious, and they're really not your constituent. They're really not engaged in the process or add value to the service that you're providing. So you see that, and of course you have hurt feelings, or you think, well, that's not me. How do you respond to that? Or my best practice has been, I just ignore all of that and think other people will understand that that's a chronic person responding. But I mean, I can't imagine being the governor and having that happen. I'm just a representative.
Yeah, right. Well, so this is the weirdest business. I remember when I talked to Jack, and Governor and I became friends in 2000, and I said he'd been an executive and so used to being able to make things happen, right? And then he was state treasurer and very few staff. And I said the weird thing about politics, though, or public service, is if you walk into a room of 100 people and 30 of them hate you, would stop, if you were lying, bleeding on the side of the road, they might stop to steal your wallet, hate you. Like, not stop to help you, but stop to steal your wallet, hate you. Like, you're really popular. Because that means 70% of people don't hate you like that. And so, I mean, you really have to have thick skin to be able to walk into a room and know, even if you're the most popular person in all of Idaho Falls, there's still 25 people, well, maybe only 15 in your point, but there's still 15% of Idaho Falls that's going to just dislike you no matter what, and they're going to be heard. So the trick is just recognizing, is this anybody I can ever bother to win over? Right? Because some people, okay, I'm never going to win this, right? If they have a genuine question, then you can try it. But for the most part, it's just being able to say this is kind of a lost cause. We have a primary opponent this time, and this all came out of a constituent relations problem. And so this guy calls me up, and he says, hey, so the Kent County SPCA, which is one of our counties, is racist, and they won't give me a dog. And I've been writing to constituent relations about this, and they have not been able to help me, so I'm going to you, the supervisor, to solve this problem. And he said, my father is famous, and if you don't fix this problem, I'm going to run for governor. And since I have a famous father, that actually works. And I was curious, about who the famous father was. So, well, who's your dad? He said, my father is Ned Beatty, who was raped in the movie Deliverance. I was like, what? I said he was in other movies too. He's a bad guy in Superman, Oscar nominee for Network. Rudy's dad and Rudy, if you want to be really proactive about it, right? And I look him up online to see, why the Kent County SPCA was being racist. I was like, well, he looks just like Ned Beatty. And so we were not able to get the dog to him, and so he is running for governor against this. And if you look at us at Governor Markell, he tweets 15 times a day-ish about us, and he's always got a blog about us. He just randomly talks about other things, and so I'm never going to win his vote. And he's dedicated himself to going to the 9/12 to build a coalition of the 9/12 Patriots and occupied Delaware, and he's going to bring them together to tackle us. And you know what? I don't think we're going to win the 9/12 Patriots either, just as a thought. So, yeah. My pleasure. Yes?
The overwhelming nature of this is how vast, how fast, how vast, and how angry the response can be. And I'll just give you my most recent experience with it. The last few days of the Minnesota legislature were dominated by a Viking stadium. We were trapped inside in discussions we really didn't want to do. So one beautiful day, I just wanted to walk out of the Capitol and sit on the front steps of the Capitol for just a few minutes, and was met with this media horde backing into the Capitol because, of course, they had a subject there, and they weren't paying any attention, so we're kind of scrambling to get out of the way. I said to no one in particular, and probably the lesson is we should not speak ever in unguarded moments.
Well, especially in Delaware, because everybody's
Minnesota.
my neighbor.
St. Paul, Minnesota. And I said to no one in particular, this is disgusting, I can't stand it. Open mics everywhere. This is St. Paul, Minnesota, within minutes, a friend of mine in the airport in Denver called my office to say my quote had just been on ESPN in the Denver airport.
What?
I started getting anger responses from all over the country, Texas and Colorado and New York, and the kindest of them were, "You ugly pig, have you looked in the mirror lately?" And the cursing and swearing was unbelievable. I wouldn't even repeat it in this room. And of course, it's easy to delete those that are from out of state. And then the question you have is, do you try in something so vast and so angry to say anything? Mm-hmm. I should tell you why it was so angry. The first reporter who tweeted it tweeted correctly. He said, Representative Alice Hausman, commenting on the media horde, the media frenzy, said this. A reporter retweeted it and made it sound like I was talking about the Vikings players that were coming up the steps. Mm. So what I learned from that is, by the way, it's okay to criticize the media. It's just not okay to criticize Vikings players.
Hey, lesson I thought you would have known from birth in Minnesota.
Because I tried with one person in Minnesota to say, you know, the first reporter tweeted correctly. I was talking about the media frenzy. The second one tweeted incorrectly and suggested that I was talking personally about Vikings players. And that one I actually converted. He emailed me back saying, "Oh, I'm sorry this put you in such a difficult position. Thanks for your service." Hmm. But when it's that vast and that overwhelming, I mean, it is, and this was a sort of a minor thing, but there is a huge anxiety about what it can very quickly do to put you in a situation where you don't know how to untangle yourself.
True. And the only saving grace is that there's so much coming at everybody all the time that everybody that was so angry and hateful at you probably forgot about it 30 seconds later because they were yelling at somebody else with 30 seconds later. What's that? 24 hours? Yeah. And so the only upside, you know, it's kind of sad that these are our silver linings these days, right, is that 2 days later they were calling somebody else terrible names and didn't remember you. But when it comes to the folks back home, if there's a reporter that actually writes a story, when you get corrections in the newspaper now, by the way, you know, there used to be on like the little box on A3. When you argue for corrections, argue to have the correction appended to the story on their website also. This is not something everybody thinks to do, but make sure that it says at the bottom of the story, like, this article was later corrected to say this. Because that way when they try and find your story about you calling the Vikings players, you know, whatever, disgusting, right, that it was actually later clarified that in fact she said this. Sir?
It seems to me, and I'm a dinosaur. I don't even use a computer with my staff.
You know, there's a lot of elected officials that have sworn off email or anything because that way there's no foiable records of them.
That's right. That's just what I want to say.
Okay.
It seems to me, and I was just talking to my neighbor over here, Liz, I've drawn an opponent this year, and he started Facebook. I'm going to use it to find out about him.
Sure. Well, that's true. But he's also using Facebook to tell people about him. And my guess is that he may have, if he's smart, he started a brand new account and deleted his old one, right? Although nothing's ever deleted. So we're going to have a real problem 40 years from now, by the way, trying to find elected officials with the bar. I mean, I used to teach a graduate seminar at Penn, and we'd have these third-year law students that would sign up because they all wanted, it was on the press and public policy, and they all want to run for office someday and things like that. And before Mardi Gras or Cinco de Mayo, I'm like, look, kids 20, 25, right? Look, you're, everything you do tonight could very well be captured on somebody's phone. And you're bothering to take this class in part because you want to run for something someday. So remember that, that this probably lives forever. I think we're going to have a problem 25 years from now when all of these people that are 20, 18 right now that have documented their whole lives, like their whole lives, I mean, their whole lives. Just, oh, wait, that's a new room, we'll take a picture. We tag you in that. I mean, I don't know what we do to find good candidates 20 years from now. But so, yeah, your opponent who has a Facebook page, is certainly everything on there is fair game. But your opponent's also taking the chance to tell his or her story to a bunch of people in a way that you may not get a chance to.
I'll turn this off. To your point, and to the gentleman's as well, I'm driving, I leave Tuesday morning, my house, about 6:30, drive down Georgia 400 for you guys that are famous. We have traffic issues in Atlanta. We have a $6 billion vote that's coming up in July that is going to put a sales tax on or not to fund some of the traffic. It's been a big issue. But I'm driving at 20 miles an hour till I get to the Northridge exit, okay? So about halfway inside the perimeter. After that, 70 miles an hour. Now, the deal is on Monday morning, we changed the emergency lane from being an emergency lane, it had been reinforced, to being a traffic lane from 6:30 to 9. Okay. Governor Deal did that. Great through traffic with no additional expense or limited additional expense. So it dawns on me what's happened. Well, there's every news channel in Atlanta has trucks parked up at this exit with bright lights shining in drivers' faces as they're driving past it. So you're 20 miles an hour to their 70. So I called this buddy of mine, Jim Galloway, at the AJC who posted this blog. I said, hey, Jim, Chuck, driving down to the airport, going out of town here, something funny for your blog. I said, here's what's going on. Just something funny, you can throw it out there. He said, can I attribute it to you? I said, yeah, it's a funny, you know. If the media would get out of the way, we wouldn't have traffic. Here's his headline: slow traffic on Georgia 400, blame the media, lawmaker says. Okay, so seriously. So now they think the media, Terry's laughing, you know what I'm living with. They already told me about it. So it's one of those things, tongue-in-cheek to somebody. Yeah. Of course, I'm not blaming the media for $6 billion worth of traffic, but hey, I mean, bright lights, drivers equals slow traffic is what we're trying. But you would not believe what came out of that. Now, it went from you idiot, it's not that, to, hey, get a life, he understands what he's doing. And then the whole thing blogged into yes or no on the $6 billion traffic question. So I think that's what scares me more than anything else. Yeah. Calling a reporter or otherwise making a statement that taken in context, hey, isn't that funny? There's a flashing light and now we can go. Then it jumps out there and creates a life of its own. What do you do about that? Just take your chances if you want to play?
So in the Capital Ideas magazine 2 months ago, they asked me to do a thing on constituent relations, and the headline was literally, it's great to be nice, it's dangerous to be funny. And, you know, by the time it gets email, I mean, how many times have you gotten an email from somebody and you just think they're really angry at you, and then you get angry back at them, and you're like, well, what? You know, somebody works for me did that last night. I was just really, and it turns out, like, I reread it, you know, 10 minutes later, and it turns out that you could read it positively, and that's actually what she meant, because she's a very wonderful person. And humor is the same way, though. I mean, you know, think about how many times you get an email that you think somebody's being mean or snarky or nasty, and it turns out they were just trying to make a joke, and it's that reporter probably should have said thank you and just not attributed it to you and done it differently. So you can also say, you know the phrase on background. So off the record means you can't use it unless you get it from somebody else. On background means you can use it, but you have to attribute it to me in a sort of overall sense. So you could have said, hey, I'm going to give you this sort of funny thing on background as a legislator.
Well,
and then,
I didn't use my name. It's just
all right, well.
You come up with a different title.
In reporters' defense, they don't always write their own headlines.
Tom
but
sort of once said, don't make people angry by aim by the gallon, right?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, that really, he should have been more thankful for you for that. All right, any questions, thoughts? All right, well, thanks again.